Hi, this is John FeedMe, also known as Spor. I'm here again at East West Studios with my Razer blade, and I'm going to talk a bit about how I use Massive. So I'm sure there's not a single one of any of you watching that hasn't heard of Native Instruments Massive, which has been kind of a staple of modern dance music. Everyone's pretty much sick of it by now, but I still like playing with it, and I tend to make libraries of sounds if I'm bored. It's kind of a great working reference for using new synths as well, just kind of in comparison, and something I still enjoy making. I've tried to find new ways of using it lately, so here's something I made the other day. Basically, as a kind of challenge, I've been seeing how much I can push out of a single patch. Almost treating Massive like a self-contained piece of software in its own right. So I've made a little loop here, which is basically built up using each oscillator as a different element in a track, and I can kind of bring them in and out. So first, I've got oscillator 1, which is just running almost a sine wave. You can see it here. Some slight enveloping on it, and then it's set to the amp, basically overall volume of it is set to a performer over here on a 16-bar loop. So if I hold the key, basically gives like a kick drum effect. So you can see I'm using the second row of the sequencer crossfaded in to bring in kind of a pulse on a round curve, and then a steep one to give kind of a defined kick. Using exactly the same technique, I have another one that's running a hi-hat, basically using white noise, so that's also running on here. So I put together, I have basically a drum loop. Then on the second one, I've got this polysaw. So that's running on a couple of envelopes. That's over here on 6. So you can see how this loop's adding definition and basically making kind of rhythm to the sound, but it's also going through a low pass, and that's going through envelopes 1 and 3. So this is the initial spike on the sound, and then a longer transition here. So then put together, these three kind of start to make up a kind of intro. Basically what I would end up using is a full intro. It's kind of interesting texturally, and then by using macros I can assign the filter position and various other things on the reverb to kind of build this up. I've also got this guy down here. He's adding another little layer to the sound. So by assigning the macro, I can kind of move it around, start to play with it. Always nice to have a little MIDI controller and basically just to have some dials to play with. I still like trying to get a little bit hands-on, although so much of it now is just, you end up doing it with a mouse and parabolic curves. It's still nice to be able to like play with what you're doing. So that's basically a simple patch that way. I've also got another macro set. These are down here, and then again just to control it spatially. But I've always found this a good exercise, especially when I'm kind of on a flight or something, somewhere where I'm kind of contained in a space, and I don't really feel free enough to kind of move around. You know, I can't record instruments or anything, or it's kind of a good exercise, I find, just to kind of keep my brain going and on the ball. getting a kind of vocal sound to bass has always been really important to me, back from when I was doing drum and bass, and then furthermore in FeedMe stuff too. Getting it to sound like it's really speaking to you gives it the element of it basically being a lead focus in the track. So working on kind of vowely sounds in Ableton is something that everyone's tried to do, and there's a lot of tutorials about. I've always found the best way is to kind of start low and pull it up using multiband compression. So this is a sound which initially doesn't sound particularly impressive. It's just a kind of, well, you'll hear. So you can hear it, like, I've got modern talking, standard wavetable moving around here on a fairly simple envelope. Very easy to edit and move around. This again is Steve Duda's OTT, which replicates a very well used multiband compressor setting in Ableton. It's so specific that it's become its own plugin because so many people, I guess, requested it to be a standalone. What it's basically doing is grabbing every available piece of the sound, and as one drops, it's filling the space of the other. So a lot of expansion and then compression as well. It ruins the dynamics of any sound you put through it. So often I'll start off using this and then try and find a less destructive way of making the same effect later, or just dial it back over time and try and find other ways of bringing out the effect as the track builds up. But as an initial kind of sketchbook tool, it's invaluable, and it's always fun to throw on things like pianos or whatever's around. So you can hear quite quickly how much extra detail it pulls out of sound, which, like I said, initially sounds quite bland. So you can hear it's pulling out way more kind of vocal, guttural sounds out of that, which, you know, initially I think people will be trying to do with distortion and stuff, but there's none of that running on this. It's just a dimension expander. That's it. That's coming straight out of Massive. Adding a bit of distortion can, you know, change the texture or whatever. Down here I've got another that that was out of the intro of Cloudburn. That was done in a very similar fashion, just using, making kind of like a guitar chugging rhythm is what we were going for when we just didn't have a guitar. So that was the solution. It's nice to try and keep a certain amount of dynamic control within the sound as well. By the end of the track, I'll probably have like 8-10 iterations of Massive running different inflections of the same sound to make sure you're not getting bored. It doesn't sound like a repeating sample. It's moving in a realistic way, the same way that two guitar takes are never going to be the same. I mentioned before, like, this is kind of an exercise for me, and I always find that when I'm in a creative mode, I want to be sitting there. I don't want to be held up working on sound design. I don't want to be slowed down by fiddling, getting the specifics of a sound totally right. So I find anytime that I'm not feeling creative in a fast moving way and I want to just kind of sit and kind of take my brain out and just work in a methodical way. I love repetition, I love kind of fine tuning, but that to me isn't a writing process. So I tend to build up libraries of sounds like this, store them. Every time the sound takes a new direction or I keep working on it, I save it as a new iteration. And I end up basically with a huge stack of sounds that I can draw from at any one time. And by doing that with everything from crash cymbals, snares, kick drums, and synths, you end up with a custom library that you can kind of pull in at any given point. So, you know, basically to further that point, I organize all my samples by a month going back to 2008. So everything I've ever made is ordered by a month, no matter what sort of sound it is, or whether it's, again, a snare, a synth, even a vocal. I order it chronologically, so I know in that period while I was working on, if that was like a FeedMe EP, all the pieces of that are going to be around that in the library I keep. I was John FeedMe, also known as Spor, and that was me talking a bit about how I use Massive and organise myself, sort of.